When we remember the early 2010s in regards to Nintendo, the story focuses immediately to the tragic case of the Wii U. I've heard and you've heard so many rehash stories about this absolutely failed console that I could quite literally tell you it by memory by now. So yeah, Wii U bad, but Nintendo had released a handheld console a year before it, being the Nintendo 3DS. And quite honestly, the early days of the 3DS weren't all that much better than the days of the Wii U. Arguably, the immediate launch was worse from a software perspective. Like, the Wii U launch at least had Mario in Nintendo Land. 3DS, on the other hand, had Steel Diver. Great. Pilot Wings. Who gives a There weren't even any Mario games for the first 6 or so months. So by holiday season that year, Nintendo had decided to give the failing 3DS a price cut because well, no one wanted it, okay? And I owned one, I could say. On top of that, they would release both Mario Kart 7 and Super Mario 3D Land that very holiday season, which people are weirdly harsh to now, but at the time, I thought they were pretty exceptional games. However, I didn't buy the 3DS for those games specifically. 3D Mario and Mario Kart had always been a prominent focus of every Nintendo console, handheld and home, so I didn't doubt they would exist. They were just, you know, the status quo. Instead, my eyes turned to 2 new games that were coming to this console, which were sequels to beloved games from my childhood. There's a certain line in the sand that's drawn to represent the life of an overly involved gamer. I mean, you know what I mean, right? Like, the first half of your life is a time where you are perhaps younger and don't think about video games all that critically. You don't research when the next Nintendo console is coming out, none of that nerd crap. Your experience is mainly comprised of games that your parents buy for you, or perhaps titles you casually enjoy at your friend's house that you've never once heard of. But what comes after is when you officially take the plunge into nerdom. It's when you become almost obsessed with Nintendo, maybe even going so far as to delve into other companies like Sony and Microsoft. Symptoms of this terminal disease include looking up constant news about their newest game consoles, figuring out how you're gonna scrounge up enough allowance money to even buy the damn thing. Perhaps you start making YouTube videos or join an internet forum. I hate to tell you, but this is the point where you go from a casual gamer to a dork. Everyone's awakening into such is different, but once you take the plunge, there's no going back. Before you know it, you'll have like 60 video essays on games no one else cares about, and I'm not speaking from my heart or anything like that. So what was my trigger that sent me down this path, you may be asking? Well, there were 2 games, as I said, that were released early or relatively early in the 3DS's lifespan that consciously made me realize that a game could indeed be bad. This therefore ended my very childhood, and it was a damning and hollowing experience that still haunts me to this very day. I mean, look what we're doing here right now. These 2 games were Paper Mario Sticker Star and Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. What these 2 products shared in common were that they were follow-ups to some of my favorite games released on my, at the time, favorite console, the Nintendo GameCube. While yes, there was Super Paper Mario on the Wii, Sticker Star's gameplay resembled the first 2 games a little bit more to me based off of the initial screenshots, so therefore it immediately caught my interest. Nintendo should be sued for false advertising. Just to get this one out of the way first, like, we don't need to spend today talking about Sticker Star. It's been discussed to death by now, including by, you know, me. Everyone knows the story of this game and how horrible it was, and I've even talked about how I feel it basically killed the franchise in at least a few different videos over the I talked about it last time. Look, Jim, stop interrupting me. I didn't need you to give me notes when I'm making my video. Everyone gets mad at me when I say that Origami King is still suffering the repercussions of it, but it is, okay? It quite literally is, and you have to accept that. There's no EXP, and there's no good story, and there's no good partners, and if you think it's better than TTYD, that's your opinion, but you are on some serious grade A copium, my friend. Again, based off of the early promotional screenshots, I thought that Sticker Star was going to be a successor to TTYD, or its predecessor. We saw partners, unique landscapes that would have fit in with the GameCube outing, and what we got was fucking none of that. I bought this game at launch, and I have to thank Nintendo for teaching me what the emotion of disappointment was, and I thought my parents' divorce was painful. But you know what? It was disappointing, but since we still got Super Paper Mario a few years back, and I assumed Paper Mario would return in form for home consoles, it wasn't the most devastating moment of my life, but I'd still put it in the top 5. The other game that was announced was Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, a sequel to the aptly named Luigi's Mansion for the Nintendo GameCube, one of my all-time favorite games to this very day. I actually reviewed Luigi's Mansion a few years ago, quite in depth, and in a surprise to absolutely no one, gave it a very positive review. Just, ignore the clickbait title. Just so you don't have to click off this video and give me more watch time, even if that would benefit my channel, I'm gonna be a real GOAT. I learned that stands for gamer of all time, and just briefly summarize my thoughts on the game, as well as talk about specific aspects of it throughout the video, since it's really going to be integral to why I don't love Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. Regardless, if you would like to see me discuss that game even further, that video will be a lot more in depth, so it's up to you, make good decisions. Let me get this out of the way first. Luigi's Mansion is not a perfect game by any metric. As an actual game, you could do a lot better, especially on the GameCube. It's not necessarily as masterful as games like Wind Waker or even Mario Sunshine or Pikmin. Yeah, how'd you ever guess I was gonna mention that one? However, many people, myself included, still consider Luigi's Mansion one of the GameCube's defining titles and point it out among the sea of classic games regardless. This is no accident. Despite it being a good but not great game, there are reasons why it left a profound impact to millions of gamers across the globe. For me personally, atmosphere is something that can make a game special to me. For example, I was recently finishing my playthrough of Metroid Prime Remastered, and one of the points in the game I most remember was a spot near a save station that just caught my eye. I'm just gonna show it, I don't really know how to describe it, but it was just some corner that was on fire. I love the lighting and the glistening little sparks of flames and whatever scrap is supposed to be here. I just appreciate the journeys my head would go on trying to imagine what this was supposed to be, not in the mind of the game designers, but in the world of Metroid. It lets the player ponder something about the lore that they may never know. Liminality is the term that some people use to describe this sort of empty space, weird feeling. There's entire video essays about the whole concept. And honestly, liminality in games is something that can transcend them to not just being great, but truly special. I feel the same sensation as well in regards to the early Super Monkey Ball games, as I've talked about many times before. I love this city that you could just see in the clock tower level. The first time you may see it may be Entangled Path, and you just see a view that's just wow. This overlook makes you think about what goes on down there. Is there a city of monkeys just thriving in their own society? Are there monkey politics, monkey churches, monkey crime? And the level where you get eaten by a whale. There are like buildings and cities here in their own little bubbles. And you have to ask just who the hell is living there? The lights are on! Mario Sunshine, who inhabits the Noki ruins? And what's the world event that had them be built? Pikmin 1 having the glass bottle, which honestly recontextualizes the entire game and hints to the player that this is an abandoned Earth. And it's just one bottle that really contributes to an entire game's lore that was expanded upon in sequels. These are special moments that aren't needed to make a game good. IGN ain't gonna skimp on a 10 out of 10 if you make a plain 3D Mario game, but here, the developers went out of their way to program them in regardless. Don't get me wrong, games can still be genius and masterful without this aspect. For example, Super Mario Galaxy or the original Pac-Man even. They're fantastic products, borderline masterpieces, with very few of these moments. However, when game developers do focus on it, these become the moments that we discuss to this very day. So a reason I love Luigi's Mansion is that this game did its atmosphere as a whole so ridiculously well. While in the dark, you might just see these rooms as a host for a scary ghost hunting scenario. When the lights had turned on and the ghost hunting music had come to a halt, you would just see a normal, realistic human setting. We have a living room, we have a regular ass bedroom. Okay, I don't know about this one, but maybe someone's house has it, that if they're rich. The details were just mind-blowing to me then and now. I specifically love the wide array of paintings that you see throughout the mansion. These mysterious figures that have no lore, no explanation, no names, nothing. Just random people who we can maybe infer probably once lived here. It's best that there's no explanation too, as if it were simply explained, we wouldn't be talking about it or even caring. Who's this guy? He looks like he's supposed to be the president of some sort. I love the amount of details they added to the wardrobe room. There's well-designed multiple articles of clothing just sitting here. As stated earlier, these additions were not necessary for the game to be good. I can't stress that enough. But even the layout of the mansion was consistent. From the master bedroom, you could see the foyer. From the foyer, you could see the boneyard. From the boneyard, you could see the graveyard. And what kind of family has a private graveyard in their backyard? And why are the tombstones misaligned? I mean, wouldn't that be a deep disrespect to the dead? What's up with Slim Bankshot? Why does he have a statue of himself in his backyard? And just who the hell is this other statue? Every moment and every point of the game is just cozy, and it shouldn't be, because there's ghosts at every corner. There's scary music. You should be crapping your pants probably. Good thing there's 2 restrooms. Like, once the lights go up after clearing all the ghosts out of a room, you hear no music, but perhaps some white noise. You see a glistening fire, a kitchen that you can envision having a conversation in during a spring break with your grandparents. It's a special game, and one that does atmosphere impeccably well. The portrait ghost scene in Luigi's Mansion really added to this world building too. These ghosts were related to each other and were a real family. You could learn information about them by scanning their hearts or reading about them in EGAD's museum. It was really neat. There were even literal books and writings on the wall where these ghosts would write stories about each other. Like how this grandma would play pranks on Aunt Petunia. Like, that's genius. I mean, no one is gonna suspect an old lady. When I'm old, I'm gonna become Spencer from iCarly. They had all their own personalities too, down to the intensity of how they resisted Luigi's poltergeist vacuum. In general, there were just lore implications around every corner, quite literally. The game just has an ethereal presentation. Luigi's Mansion uses its sort of primitive art style to enhance that experience. Luigi absolutely looks ridiculous and derpy, but the creepy ambience just supports that. The ghosts are transparent with a shining glow, and even looking at aspects of the game like the elements and how they shoot out of Luigi's vacuum, the bizarre mist that protrudes the storage room once you release the booze, or the moment you overlook a balcony to shoot at the moon, a moment that completely transcends its own reality for the sake of spectacle. It's just, I've said it so many times, but it's a special game. I bring this up in detail because Luigi's Mansion wasn't just a game. It wasn't supposed to just be a boring product to pass a corporate bill. It was an experience. In the gameplay, what 99.9% of the population actually cares about, it was pretty good. I miss when video game consoles used to present you a reason for their existence. It's not like nowadays where the PS5 releases and 30 gaming YouTubers are asking, what it does. Going back to 1996, the Nintendo 64 gave the player a control stick to introduce them to the idea of moving Mario in a 3D world. Believe it or not, a new idea at the time. Well, okay. You can bring up these sorts of examples, but I don't count them. Of course, Super Mario 64 was Nintendo's canvas for demonstrating this revitalization of gaming. And while not necessarily an innovation as much as it was a demonstration of what the technology could be, the GameCube did similar with Luigi's Mansion with the GameCube controller. The game utilized not just one, but 2 control sticks. Control your stock markets. You would use the C stick to point and aim your flashlight, and then use the control stick to hold back in the opposite direction of a ghost while holding down R. And did I mention that these were analog triggers? Meaning that you could suck or blow to different extents. All in all, Luigi's Mansion was a game that, while short, not only justified its existence, but showed what the GameCube was capable of with the controller and the graphics. This wasn't a run-of-the-mill tech demo just to make a few bucks. This was a tech demo that was made out of love and care and to make a few bucks, and it left an impact in the childhood of millions around the globe. Technically, that is millions. The game not only looked, felt, and played well, it had a very addicting structure. Luigi's Mansion was only about 3 or 4 hours, but you were able to collect the money across the mansion in order to improve your ranking, and even unlock a New Game Plus file, which was more difficult. This meant that every playthrough gave you something more to strive for as a player. I actually really miss when games used to do this, as I felt this was also a design philosophy of both Pikmin 1 with the days, and maybe even Metroid Prime, that's been largely missing since the GameCube era. Okay, point is, Luigi's Mansion was a special game, and it was extremely deserving of a sequel. If that game got it, then this does too. The concept of a Luigi's Mansion sequel can be traced all the way back to 2002, I think. Allegedly, after this game was released, Nintendo would revisit the concept the following year, attempting to add 3D integration towards it, which was explained in an Iwata Asks following the launch of the Nintendo 3DS. Now, the interview doesn't mention this being after the launch of the game, but Wikipedia says this concept was shown in 2002. So take that with a grain of salt, because that's kind of new information to me. It was always to my understanding that 3D was planned beforehand and was scrapped. So someone is wrong, and I just hope it's not me. The addition of a 3D version of Luigi's Mansion, though, is well known and well documented regardless of when it happened, and it could explain why they would wait until the 3DS to make their sequel, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, or Luigi's Mansion 2 as it was called everywhere besides America. There weren't that many rumblings or plans of a Luigi's Mansion game during the rest of the 2000s though. Though Yoshihito Ikebata said that there had always remained a sentiment of the company wanting to develop a sequel, at least according to this Wired interview with Ikebata and Bryce Holiday, a director at Next Level Games, and the company that was going to make Luigi's Mansion 2. They had remembered how Nintendo tried to integrate 3D into Luigi's Mansion 1, and this confirmed to them that the 3DS was the time that Nintendo would finally go all in on the sequel, though it's kind of complicated how this came to be. Apparently Next Level Games at first didn't even know the hardware they were producing Dark Moon for, but assumed because Nintendo had at one point mentioned the failed Luigi's Mansion 3D and thought the console would have 3D. I'm just as confused as you are. Well, that's a pretty damn big assumption to make. I mean, it worked out, but like there were families on the line, livelihoods at risk, careers that could have gone down the toilet. I mean, what if Nintendo just came out and said, we're making a toaster with a screen on it? You know, I would have laughed at it back then, but now we have the Alarmo. Again, circling back to an Iwata-esque conducted around the time of Dark Moon's release, the development of Luigi's Mansion 2 seemed to be a bit of a whirlwind. Firstly, while the game was released in 2013, it was confirmed to have been in development since 2009. One of the lead developers, Chad York, flexed in the interview that he had 2 children in the time it took for this game to be made. Well, good for you, Chad York, aren't you a Chad? Next Level Games, probably rightfully so, popped off when they heard the news that they were getting to make Luigi's Mansion 2, which was revealed to them in sort of a drumroll fashion, and you know what? I love how extra these game developers are. You know what though? I would have popped off too, if all Nintendo had given me prior were sports titles and a franchise that no children in that era had heard of, such as Punch-Out! Alright, I'll just be honest, maybe this will attract hate, but if I was a game company and I saw the resume of games Next Level Games had made, I wouldn't have even trusted them to make a Wii Play sequel. The Super Mario Strikers games were really good to be fair, and I know the Punch-Out Wii game had received pretty unanimous praise at the time and sparkling reviews, but I wouldn't say this company had made any definitive masterpieces either. Besides those 3 games, they basically had just made a bunch of licensed slop. Well, here's Luigi. Have fun. One aspect of development worth noting is that Shigeru Miyamoto had taken a somewhat sizable role during the development of Luigi's Mansion 2. Now, it was basically just as an advisory position as he is for a lot of games, but he would still visit the team bi-weekly. The developers would listen as Miyamoto would talk about television shows he was watching, and how they were structured, with multiple events taking place in the arc of a story. Oh no. Listen, I love Miyamoto like he's a part of my own family. He gave us Pikmin, Pikmin gave me my YouTube career helped me find an actual career. He basically saved my life. But I don't feel like the 2010s were necessarily his best era. Case A, case B, case C. So whatever, we can debate all day whether or not his influence on the game made it better or worse. I think it's something we can touch on a bit later. We gotta actually play the game. But just know for now, he at least had an influence on the development of this product. Something else that's touched upon throughout the interview was how this game was developed during the year of Luigi, a year where a whole lot of Luigi products and games came out. I personally feel like this game would have been released regardless. I mean, a lot of these were, so it's kind of just a marketing gimmick. I don't feel like we need to go too in-depth here. If you really want to see a video discussing this more in detail, I recommend you go check out my friend Johnny's video to see a full telling of that story. We don't have the time today, okay? For now though, let's just boot up the game and see how Luigi's Mansion 2 turned me into the very degenerate you see before your eyes, before your screen today. I don't actually own a 3DS. Yeah, so about a year ago, Nintendo announced they would be remastering Luigi's Mansion 2 for the Nintendo Switch for $60. Yeah, so I'll just say off the cuff that this isn't a great remaster, purely in the sense that they made quite literally, no enhancements to the game. The visuals are basically just an up-res exact replica of the 3DS title, and there are still so many bizarre moments where you could tell the developers were trying to hone into the 3D effect still. The Switch version suffices for the purposes of this review review for 2 reasons. It will give me an authentic playthrough and recording of my experience, since it really isn't all that different of a game, and will ensure we actually have non-dubbed footage, since I can just record my Nintendo Switch with a capture card. I'll say that the game looked great on 3DS and really bad on the Switch, but I just won't be docking points for the latter. This isn't really a video about the Switch game, it's just basically recorded on that for the sake of better footage, so just be grateful for your, eyes, and let's move on. Booting up the game, we're introduced to the Dark Moon. Whoa, he said the title. Well, kind of. As said, this game was called Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon in the United States, Luigi's Mansion 2 everywhere, and then was just completely renamed to Luigi's Mansion 2 across the board with the advent of the Switch remaster. So we're just going to be calling this Luigi's Mansion 2 the rest of the video. And that is a new record for how fast I got off topic in a video I was making. Anyways, we see Professor Elvingad working in the lab as a bunch of little cutesy green ghosts circle the mansion. Yes, I know my footage is stuttering here, and I'm sorry. Basically, my capture card has been causing problems on my Switch, so I'll try to cut around the footage glitching where I can. I am still troubleshooting this issue. But anyways, King Boo does some King Boo stuff, and all the minions type of ghosts go ape shit and destroy everything in Elvingad's lab. We then are taken to Luigi's home, which is actually a callback to the C ranking ending of Luigi's Mansion 1. Luigi is canonically average. I guess he at least gets to move out of him and Mario's pathetic looking house from the Paper Mario games. As he sleeps in his chair, the TV goes out, just like every damn cliche horror movie starts, and Egad speaks to him through the TV. Was his damn phone broken or something? You couldn't send a text? Well, I guess it's Luigi's fault for using a 4x3 TV in 2024. Or I guess, 2013. Either way, it's embarrassing. Upgrade to 16:9, Luigi. We're then transported to Egad's new bunker, which is obviously not the same one as we saw back in Luigi's Mansion 1. And this is Evershade Valley. Egad came out here to study the Dark Moon and figure out why the ghosts all freaked out. Well, the Dark Moon had basically disappeared from the sky, and okay, this story is whatever. I mean, it's a Luigi's Mansion game. It doesn't need a good story, to be fair, and LM1's story was stupid as all hell. I mean, who just goes to a mansion that they won a contest that they never even entered? So I guess LM2 starts on a more logical note, where we're tasked with finding the Dark Moon pieces. Listen, do you really need me to sit here and recite a Wikipedia article or something? Let's just get into the weeds. Luigi's Mansion 2 has 2 pivotal structural differences in comparison to the first game. Luigi's Mansion 1 took place in one single mansion. It was divided into areas, which served as little breaks in the gameplay. What was kind of neat though is while there were defined blocks of the game, you had plenty of reasons to go back to the other areas in the mansion. There were often keys that took you back to the previously locked rooms, and there were just charming moments that helped to tie the mansion together. For instance, after Boolossus, there was a little blackout in the game where you had to go to Area 1 to defeat Uncle Grimly, so you could go down to the break room and turn on the lights. There were the boos in Area 1 you could go back to after you set them free in Area 2. Then Easter eggs like watering the plants in between areas. It was all pretty neat and gave the game a very cohesive and tight feeling. So Luigi's Mansion 2, it doesn't do any of that. Instead, this game is split between 5 mansions. To take this a step further, each of those mansions are now split up between different acts, similar to Miyamoto's soap opera dramas or whatever nonsense he was watching at the time. Most mansions have 6 missions, with the notable exception being the Hidden Mind, which has 4. Now, I don't instantly want to start this by saying because it's different, it's bad. I don't think that's particularly fair. However, we can agree at a very minimum, it's a drastic change from the previous game. Whether or not you like it, you could probably see why lots of fans weren't receptive to it. So we're gonna do a little experiment in terms of the video structure, because I think the best way I can describe to you the mission system of LM2 would be to take you mission by mission through the first mansion of the game. Close your eyes, it's about to get horrible. The first mansion of Luigi's Mansion 2 takes us to the Gloomy Manor. Was a Boo haunted house taken or what? Sorry, everyone calls me a Scott clone and not an ABGN clone, so I'm trying to shift the narrative a little bit there, The first of the missions here sends Luigi inside to get the Poltergust 5000 that Egad left in the garage. Early on, the game establishes 2 key concepts. One is that you can look through the little peepholes throughout the world to get a little preview of what's coming up next. I kind of like these. I mean, they're cute. These are obviously developed for the 3DS and its gyro, and don't make as much sense on the Switch. The second concept we get introduced to is not as charming. It's the fact that EGAT calls you more often than the IRS calls me after I allegedly failed to pay my taxes for 10 years. Luigi then navigates the mansion and finds a missing binky for his poltergust. This lets him fight ghosts, light up buttons throughout the world that unlocks doors, and a bunch of other nonsense. After I guess what EGAD decides is enough gameplay for the player, you get transported back to the lab. In the next mission, we have to walk between multiple rooms to the room we were just in a few minutes ago, in between all the button mashing and nonsense. We then go back to a room we were in at the start of the mission to grab the key and go back to the foyer. Honestly, this mission is pretty fun and feels like classic Luigi's Mansion, but hold your horses, don't ride them into the sunset yet. The third mission is again pretty good. You explore rooms, you fight off ghosts, and face off against the first mini-boss. However, I want to note, by the time you get to the fourth mission, you fight the ghosts multiple times in the foyer room. It eventually gets super repetitive, and ghosts are always spawned when you fall down this goddamn suitcase. It's kind of funny the first time around, but it's a joke that wears its welcome quicker than you can blink. Compare this to Luigi's Mansion 1 for a second. A room is dark once, with the exception of the blackout, but once it's done, that room is sort of considered a safe zone for Luigi, one that maybe you could go back and strategize in, or just know that you're not gonna get murdered. By this point in the mansion, you're sort of done visiting all that many new locations in the gloomy manor. You're revisiting a lot of rooms and have to often take the same paths you already taken just to get to a room you specifically need to get to. And unfortunately, this is a very, very common theme throughout the game's 5 mansions. This issue only compounds further with how Luigi's Mansion 2 implements its boos, since it's a system that increases the potential for backtracking tenfold in each mission. In Luigi's Mansion 1, after a room was cleared, you would shake and hump all the damn furniture until a boo came out, only to be greeted by puns that your weird, creepy uncle with a restraining order makes at your family reunion. You would then fight the boo by chipping away their health with your vacuum. The difficult part about the boos is that they have the ability to go between the other rooms here, which was really irritating for the sake of backtracking, and also the fact that you may or may not have unlocked the room they went into. I'll be honest, most people who have played this game agree that this is the lowest point of Luigi's Mansion. I think the early game boo collecting is pretty addicting though. I mean, they have very little health, so it was rare if they ended up going to another room unless you sucked. It was just late game that would have boos with more health than I have will to live. But I will say, generally speaking, the boos served a purpose to the world. You needed 40 out of the 50 in the game to be able to access the final boss, with 15 of them being collected from the Boo Loss's boss fight. So with 25 minimum boos required to be focused on by the player, you were able to sort of pick and choose which boos you wanted to go after. And if you cared about the Luigi's Mansion arcade ranking system, getting 50 of them would net you a gold diamond, which is the highest optional gem that you could collect from a monetary perspective. This was a neat system that rewarded all playstyles of the person playing, although it wasn't, executed. How do I word this? Well. So with all that being said, there's a few problems I had with the boos in Luigi's Mansion 2. Firstly, to actually collect a boo, you have to use your strobe light to find a missing piece of the scenery. This strobe light is gained pretty early on, and this is a fairly neat ability. It just spreads some good old rainbow light throughout the room to uncover missing objects, or it makes paintings come to life after you suck balls. Don't demonetize me. Okay, I don't know how else I'm supposed to word this. It's a neat feature, but before you drink that booze hearing me get off topic, let's get back to the booze. After you uncover one with your strobe light is when you have the actual quote-unquote fight, which is a lot weirder than the first games. Instead of just using your vacuum like a ghost fight, you just hurl them basically throughout a room like a ping pong ball on crack. Now the gameplay itself isn't my issue. I mean, this is fine, and arguably it's better than the tedium of Luigi's Mansion 1's room swapping. It's more so how they fit into the general world and structure of the game that's an issue. Firstly, there's one boo per mission. What this often means is that to find a boo sometimes, you have to go back and look diligently in rooms that aren't always on the beaten path, increasing the game's potential for backtracking. Not to mention, since you only get the ability to fight boos 4 missions into the game, there are now 3 missions that you literally have to replay from start to finish if you want to get them all. This instantly adds like an hour to the game if you need to 100% it. Secondly, it's really just not that fun to have to always be thinking about finding an invisible object. It's part of the core gameplay of Luigi's Mansion 2 as a whole, and that's fine, but it just adds sort of a paranoid feeling to me while playing the game, like I'm always gonna be missing something. But thirdly, boos don't really matter. At the end of the game, game, there's no total field check to progress, and all getting the booze in a mansion unlocks is just an extra bonus mission per mansion where you have to catch ghosts. I mean, I guess it's fine to get some additional content, but ultimately the booze in Luigi's Mansion 2 are really the antithesis of the first game in just about every way. I could forgive most of these issues except for the backtracking, which is why I bring it up here. Constantly having to go through rooms and places you've already explored, whether it be for the main objective or just the side ones, makes the game feel so repetitive and monotonous. And if you can't tell where I'm going with this, the repetition is really my biggest issue with the mission system. And this will be a case in point moment once I direct your eyes already looking to the screen, hopefully, to mission A5. Well, I don't know. Some people just listen to YouTube videos. If you're one of them, you'll never see the secret message I put on screen right now. Anyways, you might be asking, Jeff, what do you do in this mission? Well, you have to go around the gloomy manor and collect spider webs. Look, I wish I was making this up. It sounds like a joke, but I'm not that mean to you guys. I guess at least it's just mindless. It means you seldom have to produce a thought while playing the game. But what a lazy and uninspired mission. You know, there were spiderwebs in Luigi's Mansion 1. They were just kind of a stupid visual detail. This type of mission is the sort of crap people roasted the hell out of Team Chaotic's story for in Sonic Heroes. Now look, I've been playing video games basically my entire life, and I'll tell you up front, one filler mission is not usually an issue. That's about par for the course. The problem is that it's not just one mission, because what if I told you that this game has at least 1 or 2 filler missions per mansion? Neat. For the purposes of your sanity, okay, really just my sanity, I'm not gonna go over literally every mission from here, but I do want to talk about some of the filler missions. This game has some acts where you have to chase a ghost dog named the Polterpup through walls, and essentially just backtrack through rooms you either previously explored or will explore in future missions. The missions will offer some differences, and you do have to at least sort of use your strobe light to see the paw prints, but in terms of what it provides to the game, it's nothing of value. Or how about the mission that you have to just guide a toad who probably pissed his damn diaper? And that's not to mention the multitude of missions that, regardless of objective, you have to navigate through the same rooms you've already been in over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. As I said earlier, Luigi's Mansion 1 was not without its share of backtracking. Even disregarding the examples I had already made, the elements system was the biggest offender of it, as sometimes if you needed fire, you'd have to walk all the way back to Area 2. Not cool. But I can forgive Luigi's Mansion backtracking most of the time due to its inherent maze-like game design approach. The whole mansion is obviously interconnected. I wouldn't call it a Metroidvania, except I did, my bad, but it has the elements of it which make me respect what they were going for. With the missions though, it just makes me feel like my time is not being respected, and that is one of the worst feelings one can have while playing something that is supposed to be fun and waste time in the first place. Now something I like to say, which is usually a counter argument for why the game is structured in this way, is that it is on a handheld console. I know people think, well, you gotta play in little small bursts so you can save and put the game down, blah 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 blah. This could be seen in a few games at the time. You look at like Mario 3D Land or Sticker Star, although I don't think you're winning any argument where I gotta compare you to Sticker Star, but that's okay. But there's also games where this wasn't a factor. I mean, Mario 64 DS, Mario and Luigi, tons of RPGs, even Zelda games on the DS. And not to mention the 3DS will just, it'll just let you close the thing if you can't save right away and you could pick it up later. So what are we even doing here? Or how about the Switch? Look at that! Isn't that amazing? You ever play Ocarina of Time? You decide you're done, you save the game, you turn it off. You are set back to one of the game's predetermined spawn points, but that's it. So why couldn't Luigi's Mansion 2 just be like that? Why couldn't the first mission that we just talked about have the 4 missions be interconnected, or have a goal of collecting the spider webs as you played the game, and then you just fought the boss? Was Miyamoto's insistent that this game be similar to an episodic TV show really that important? Well, I'm gonna answer that in the next video. We're gonna talk about about this game over the course of 6 episodes because that's apparently the way to do it according to Miyamoto. Another downside to this game being structured the way it is the change in how Luigi's Mansion 2 ranks you. It's not that important to the game, but basically you're able to get up to 3 stars on any given mission, and not just at the end of the game. This is calculated based on how fast you finish the level, how many ghosts you caught, how much money you steal off the ground, and health lost. Now, I personally don't like this because it destroys a lot of the immersion that Luigi's Mansion provided. I really liked being able to take my time going through the mansion, interacting with objects, being able to take a little detour if I needed to check some old rooms. Not being timed in that experience made it a better game, and added to its immersion and odd peacefulness. Now, the benefit to the system, though, is it doesn't really matter, because I just ignore it and take my darn tootin' good old time. So if it doesn't matter, why did I bring it up? Because y'all would have said that I should have. Like, look, what Luigi's Mansion 2 brought to the table is a like it or hate it sort of change to the franchise. While most people I've seen have supported the way LM1 is set up, there are some who love how Luigi's Mansion 2 is structured. And it's honestly a cult classic game for a ton of people in the same way 1 is for me. That's fine. It's a preference sort of thing that divides the fan base to this day though. And if you like it, that's totally alright, but as someone who loves the original game, it just took a lot of the charm away from me, you know? I don't want this to be all we talk about in regards to Luigi's Mansion 2. There's some good things that we can actually talk about. So until we get to the dramatic, sappy conclusion, let's just put it aside for a second and talk about, the damn game. I'm in California. Where is this thunder coming from? There are aspects to Luigi's Mansion 2 that I enjoy. The core gameplay is pretty good. Believe it or not, I actually do find the core ghost catching pretty fun. It's not as in-depth or control-heavy as it may have been in Luigi's Mansion 1, but there's still some serious level of satisfaction here. The main difference in Luigi's Mansion 2 is that you no longer have your flashlight stun them by default as you did in the first game. Rather, you have to charge it up and then stun them before being able to suck them up. This actually can be seen as an improvement, as it was very common in the first game to stun a ghost and have it disappear in 3 frames. Additionally, now you can get a little extra boost if you fill up your meter and press A while in the fight. Now, if there's anything that I would say that's bad about the ghost fighting in this game, it's really just the simple fact that they get very repetitive. Outside of this game's unique ghosts, there are like 6 types for this entire adventure, at least in the main mode. But hold your dang horses, they double that number by adding more health to them in late game and by adding swords and buckets to their heads. Yippee! So if you compare the raw numbers, Luigi's Mansion isn't that far off, I guess. Luigi's Mansion 2 has the greenies, the slammers who slam, hiders who... yeah, you get it. Sneakers for the original Xbox, who sneak, and creepers. Not that. Actually, the more I write this, it's a lot more embarrassing than I realized. Luigi's Mansion 1 has the gold ghosts, the purple punchers, the blue twirlers, the ghosts who eat bananas, the ghosts who... yeah, ghost guys, and a whole bunch of ghosts who appear maybe once or twice throughout the game. So, look, we're comparing a total of 5 regular enemies versus 5 and some cash and change. Not to mention, LM2 has its fair share of random bits and bobs as well. So, let's just call it even. Shills might say this is fine, but there's just one issue. Luigi's Mansion 1 is a game you beat in an afternoon, and LM2 is a game you beat in an entire day if you have no job. So the lack of ghost variety is really consequential to the experience here. I enjoyed the sheer act of catching ghosts, but it got pretty damn monotonous after a while to see the same old ass ghosts. It's good in mid-game that they were like, alright, we're gonna raise the health, and that's fine from a challenge perspective, but at that point, wouldn't it have just been better to, make new ghosts? If you sweet talk to Miyamoto, you guys could have gotten more budget. Why else does, hey, Pikmin exist? And let's just get this out of the way here. Yes, I know Luigi's Mansion 2 has a few other ghosts in the form of the unique ones who appear throughout the game. There is also the Scare Scraper mode that has a much broader cast, but right now I'm just focusing on single player material. And see, I would say if you're a fan of LM2 and you want to win this argument, it's probably not in your best interest to point out that this game has quote-unquote unique ghosts, because it's almost like Luigi's Mansion 1 objectively did this better, and you're gonna look like an absolute clown in this argument. Oh goody, is it time to talk about the portrait ghosts? Sorry, it's just nice to have an argument that I'm automatically gonna win and LM2 fans will automatically lose. Okay, so Luigi's Mansion 2 has some ghosts that I guess are sort of maybe possibly portrait ghost-ish if you squint from a mile away. So we have the Gobber, a bigger guy. Gee, I wonder if LM1 did this better. Okay, but then we have the Poltergeist, a ghost who plays the piano. Gee, I wonder if LM1 did this better. We have the Polterpup, who's... Actually, that's kind of a good character. I mean, I was going to point out that LM1 had a ghostly dog named Spooky and do that same line again and just like freak out or something as a joke, but it's the Polterpup. It's too cute. I'll give you guys that one. Then there are the Three Sisters, which is a type of unique ghost not seen in Luigi's Mansion 1, though I honestly cannot stand this fight. I mean, maybe I'm just dumb, but this fight was really not intuitive to figure out what to do. It felt like any method of attack I could come up with either didn't work or worked if I prayed to the freaking skies above at a 5% chance. Eventually, I had to look it up, and it was kind of more my fault than the game's, since basically you're supposed to let them spin a lot more than I did. So whatever, I won't go into one of my controversial tangents about how this boss is bad, even though it's completely my fault. But regardless, I'll give Luigi's Mansion 2 this boss as a unique set of characters that could maybe rival the portrait ghosts. And that's the only one. Like, outside of these, there's a recurring mini-boss named the Possessor, and... Okay, I don't think this even remotely makes up the argument for LM2's ghost diversity, so if you were about to bring this up, feel embarrassed. So yes, I've talked about this in my previous Luigi's Mansion video and even a little bit here, but portrait ghosts are so inherently important to Luigi's Mansion's distinctive identity. And this sort of just goes with the theme of the first game. You were in one mansion, it was all connected, blah, blah, blah. You get it by now. The thing is though, the portrait ghost added so much to the game, and even the Three Sisters and the piano ghost and the dog just don't come close to the same motif. Firstly, let's just talk about the gameplay perspective of the portrait ghost before we get to the lore and aspects and stuff that's a little more subjective. Without portrait ghosts, I feel like Luigi's Mansion 1 would have been a completely different game, and a completely different game for the worse. It wasn't just the fact that they looked unique, it was the fact that each ghost provided a really new twist to the formula. I mean, no two portrait ghosts were alike, well, except for the twins and the triplets. Okay, no fight was alike. Every ghost had their unique way about going about beating them, and it really did a lot to break up the monotony of the game. Maybe you had to play pool with Slam Bank Shot, or shoot balls of yarn at Nana, or light Mr. Lug's candle on fire to scare him into the butler's quarters. That's just not nice. So the gameplay was not only fantastic and thought-provoking, but special, as I've been saying. These characters all added to the lore and contributed to the world as well. There is some in-game lore for the very few unique ghosts in Luigi's Mansion 2, but look at these side by side and tell me they hit the same. Even the goon ghosts we have here... Scrap that word, I forgot that word has been ruined by the internet. Okay. Even the generic ghosts are so much worse here. In LM1, they were kinda cutesy, but still threatening, like you took them seriously. At least I did. The ghosts in Luigi's Mansion 2 are basically the equivalent to the minions from the Despicable Me franchise, or similar to the Rabbids, you know, that type of character. I mean, it's a type of archetype that I feel appeals to children a lot more than someone my age. It's hard for me to take characters or enemies seriously or feel invested in them when the entire purpose is, haha, please laugh. Haha, are you laughing? Haha, please tell me you are laughing. They are funny, to be fair, and I do smirk a bit while peeping through the game's weirdly consistent holes and walls, but I just don't care for enemies that are here just for the lols. It just feels like to me Luigi's Mansion 2 doesn't want to be taken seriously. Like the developers, I could tell, are having a good old time and yucking it up as they make these scenarios, but Luigi's Mansion 1 was designed as a game meant to have some sort of meaning to it. I mean, there's upside to this too. Luigi himself is really funny and really well animated, as well as Charles Martinet giving a brilliant performance as a character. And the music is very, very different than LM1. It has all sorts of songs for each and every scenario, compared to LM1 having just one, which is supposed to be a little more ambient and scary. But net, this new tone for Luigi's Mansion just isn't it. Look, there comes a point in this review where there's only so much I could say about Luigi's Mansion 2 as it relates to its predecessor, because obviously this game was not meant to be like Luigi's Mansion 1. It's a complete change in game design philosophy, and look, I'm aware of that, right? But there's a greater and bigger reason that Luigi's Mansion 2 was the end of my childhood. Because this game took place in Nintendo's Okay, there's no thunder coming, I guess. The Dark Era. There it was. Alright, we're gonna take a little deviation from the game real quick to talk about Nintendo as a whole in this era, because this stems from a structural problem with Nintendo that quite simply can't be ignored and is what hurt Luigi's Mansion 2 in my opinion. If you'd like to hear about, the game or whatever, I'll put a time code on screen right now, as I do still plan to talk about the unique mansions or other gameplay abilities, but let's just put all this aside for a second. Well, many seconds. Nintendo during the GameCube era had a tendency to make some of the most unique and diverse products, not only in the gaming industry, but seen throughout their own individual franchises. Mario went from stomping Goombas in a grassy land to being buzzed out of prison to clean a tropical island. Zelda, yeah, we got unique games for side characters too, games that we didn't see too often in the Wii era or beyond. I'm speaking not only about games like Luigi's Mansion and Wario World, but games like Super Princess Peach and Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land on the Nintendo DS. There were also unique IPs being made, like Pikmin, which got me a hater, but I don't feel like this would have been made during the Wii era. Now, I feel like people are very quick to just dismiss this as nostalgia, but I don't think it's that simple. I mean, compared to 20 years ago, I'm ancient now, and I got that feeling I described a few times during the Switch era. That's why, despite not many people caring about this game, I wanted to give Princess Peach Showtime a review on my channel, because it was just the first time in a while I felt Nintendo focused on a side character. We had a Zelda game that starred Zelda, and games as a whole just started trying to match their peaks of the GameCube era. Look no further than Pikmin 4, which was basically more of a sequel to Pikmin 2 than it was to 3. Mario Party came back from the dead, Super Mario Odyssey, and even Bowser's Fury took elements from Mario Sunshine. You get the point. I don't need to keep just listing Switch games endlessly. So my point is, it isn't just nostalgia for me. I took a look at the Wii era, alright? Or really, the Wii 3DS and Wii U, but it started with the Wii. Games just started to become more devoid of charm and personality to appeal to the casual gamers, who were, to be fair, the main audience of the Wii. Mario's Dark Era has been heavily documented, but look at Mario. You look at New Super Mario Bros. Wii and cry. Even great games like Donkey Kong Country Returns and Kirby's Epic Yarn just felt like they were less for a gamer and more for a general audience. The games just started feeling not necessarily worse to me in this era, but different. It was tricky, right? Because these were all technically great games still. I mean, Nintendo knew if we play it safe, it'll technically be perfect, and IGN and shills across the board will give us 10s. It still works for Pokemon. Look at Super Mario 3D World. It's a great game, sure, but regarded as one of the worst 3D Mario titles. And the same could be said about Skyward Sword in relation to the Zelda franchise, which forced motion controls and was, and is, probably the most linear Zelda experience to date. Now look at the reviews for Skyward Sword, and here's the reviews for Breath of the Wild. So I bring this up just to say, I don't actually think this is Next Level Games' fault in particular. In retrospectives, I don't typically like to talk about future games in the series, but I do feel like it's actually important to talk about Luigi's Mansion 3 real quick, since it proves a bit of a point, and I'm sure I'll get to that video in 2026 or something. So by the time you watch it, you'll forget this video happened. I know I will. But look what we have here. Luigi's Mansion 3 has one coherent mansion, or, hotel. Now, you don't go between floors or areas as much as you did in LM1, but the point is, it gave the game a chance to be more in line with the first in the series, and more importantly, there were portrait ghost-like characters. And the game just oozes with a lot more personality and detail than LM2 did, in my opinion. And again, we're seeing this with a lot of Switch titles. Breath of the Wild was a fuck you to Skyward Sword. Pikmin 4 was not only a complete 180 from Pikmin 3, but almost didn't even acknowledge that game existing. Again, I could list example after example, but these paragraphs also make me really miserable to edit while I do that, so I'm just gonna cut myself off. Point is, Luigi's Mansion 2 was a victim of this direction of Nintendo in this era. It was really just a time where Miyamoto and other higher-ups had too much influence in an industry that was rapidly changing. And it was the same deal for Sticker Star. There were rumors around the Wii U era that Nintendo games started having mandates for less unique characters. And of course, there's been blame back and forth that Miyamoto himself damaged Sticker Star. Although, I don't know, that's been disproven or proven. I don't know. I feel like that game is just such a catastrophic piece of crap that every executive and everyone in Nintendo just blames someone else. It was just a sad era for Nintendo games, though. I mean, the tricky part about navigating these discussions is that, again, these games are technically all great. Well, not that one. They just don't have the same feel, and that's the hardest aspect to write about in a game review, because feel is entirely subjective. And so I'm here to say, in regards to LM2, this made the game a good game, but not great.
There, so I don't want anyone yelling at me. I said your game was good, your beloved little masterpiece in your mind. I said it was good. It is a good game. I should probably also, talk about the game that I just said was good at some point.
The first mansion on Luigi's Mansion 2 is kind of boring and bad, but the game picks up steam gameplay-wise from there. The second mansion, the Haunted Towers, is actually quite unique. This mansion is basically a greenhouse with trees and a bunch of shrubbery growing through the walls. There's a pretty interesting gameplay mechanic in the form of bubblegum. Yeah, I know it's something different in the universe, but it looks like bubblegum from Sonic Heroes. What I like about this mansion in particular is that there's a bit more diversity than you would realize at a first glance. It's not just all shrubbery and cherries. There's still quite a lot of normal looking rooms and areas. It's not as thought-provoking or charming as the mansion from the first game, but it still kind of reaches that element of mystique. There's even some rooms that have never been done before in this series, like a swimming pool. And yes, who cares about a swimming pool? But as I've been saying about LM1, I really like the rooms grounded in reality. One of my favorite moments of the entire game, not just this mansion, is the rumpus room. What's a rumpus? I'm too scared to look it up, but this room really got me off guard. There's some creepy ass dolls in here. I mean, this room actually just feels like a room that could have been in Luigi's Mansion 1. It got me off guard since this game is not necessarily creepy or weird. And then you get here and you have to check if the Nintendo logo is on the box art. The old Clockworks is a pretty neat aesthetic, one that I don't feel like would even be noteworthy if it wasn't for the fact that this game takes place entirely at night. I enjoy this mansion since this game's puzzle solving aspect really picks up from here. There's a really cute section in C3 where there's a conveyor that pushes Luigi backwards, and you have to just barely inch your way up on these Scooby-Doo ass hallways to make it to the end. This mansion also just has a lot of moments that has Luigi interacting with the world in a meaningful way, such as setting alarm clocks for the ghosts to wake them up or to get inside. As said, I love in Luigi's Mansion the moments you engage with the world, and this kind of scratches away at that itch a bit. I will say though that the Polterpup chasing mansion here is a load of BS. There was one point where the paw prints were completely ambiguous as to where he went. I mean, would you really guess this pattern when he went upstairs? I actually had to look up where to go, and yes, I like puzzle solving, but if it's so confusing or cryptic to the point of having to cheat, then the game doesn't really get points for that. I like this section to do with the mummy ghosts. Ooh, why don't these count as unique ghosts, you might ask? Because they're not. It's probably the game's best moment of shaking up the combat though. Don't get me wrong though with this mansion, I mean this isn't that hard or thought-provoking, but the puzzles they do introduce here strike a good balance between difficulty and charm. C5 is the first Toad mission where I at least didn't mind the mechanic of Toads, since there were some creative uses to the gameplay mechanic of shooting him at a wall. Look, I didn't say it was ethical. The Toad gameplay in general does have better moments than the Polterpup missions, but something that pisses me off about them is that you could be standing right next to a door sometimes and the damn Toad just won't go in. Like, I get it, the game doesn't want you to leave him behind, but what else do you want me to do from here? He's like 1 pixel away, bro. Then we have the secret mine, which is really interesting too, with some really special moments, like when you snowboard down an icy hill, or pee your pants when a polar bear carpet screams at you.
I didn't mean Luigi.
Even this brilliant moment when you leave the mansion and ride on these bullies in an outdoor hilly environment is just memorable. People say Luigi's a coward, but risking your life like that requires balls of goddamn steel. This aesthetic in Mansion I feel really resonates with me because it's sort of a continuation of a room seen in Luigi's Mansion 1 that I really valued, being the cold storage. I feel like this room is never discussed all that much in the first game, which is fair. It's one of the more fillery sort of rooms. That's why they call it storage. But I don't know, I thought it was just interesting in a game full of realistic rooms and ghosts to have a guy who's just vibing with his little snowy coat. The liminality of this room is neat. I love that there are 2 shelves just in the background that are just like food or something. It's been sitting there so long that they quite literally froze. Same with these damn beer kegs and boxes. I don't know, was this intended to be a special moment? Probably not, but sometimes though, I think the most special moments in games are the ones that aren't meant to be that. Okay, my parole officer has told me to stop talking about Luigi's Mansion 1 though, so my point is that this was a cute idea from the first game that I appreciate them expanding upon in the sequel. The weird part about the secret mines though is that there are just less missions here than all the other mansions in the game. As I said earlier, there are 4 here and 6 everywhere else. Now, I'm aware this is sort of a double-sided complaint, because I know I've said that the other mansions in this game have a bit too much filler. So I'm like, yeah, maybe these mansions should have all only had 3 missions anyway, like the Secret Mine does, but it's just inconsistent and also fairly disappointing since, you know, this world is actually good. Maybe the developers just ran out of time or money, and it's like, maybe if they didn't develop these weird side levels, they would have, you know, had the money.
They don't call me Jeff Segway Compass for nothing.
Yeah, so ignore me shoehorning this in, I don't know where else to put this, but Luigi's Mansion 2 has a few side areas, which are pretty well hidden on average. Essentially, these are mini challenges that test if you know how to control your Luigi under a time limit. If you win, you get a gem, LM2's main collectible. Some of these, you could tell, were meant to be on the goddamn 3DS, which this will be one of my rare actual critiques of the Switch version, besides the Mario Kart Tour looking graphics, but sometimes you'll see a room that's an optical illusion, which would have made complete sense on the 3DS. And then since the Switch, you know, doesn't have 3D and these rooms are timed, you're basically completely screwed out of getting the gem. And that's your only chance unless you want to replay the entire mission.
And I don't.
Getting back to the game though, the final mansion, the treacherous mansion, is by far my favorite and I think many other people's favorite part of the game. I'll say up front that this has some of the best game design easily, not only in the entire game, but maybe in terms of the entire series. The main focus of this mansion is portals. Okay, hold your lawsuits, PC fanboys, relax. Now, portals were technically introduced in the prior mansion, to be fair, but this is really where the developers turned on the valve with their usefulness. Basically, the portals connect to rooms that have their own distinct themes. So the first floor is a bit basic, with each of the bigger rooms containing a throwback of sorts to the other 4 mansions of the game. Now, I'm not always the biggest fan of when games do this, as it feels like a way to cut down on resources just to be like, oh, look at these worlds you just played, aren't you nostalgic for last Tuesday? However, I will give this game a pass here since they actually pull this off very well. The trick I really liked with one of these missions is that there's usually an item in one of the 4 rooms that works with solving a puzzle in a corresponding room. What I liked about this was that it was never obvious. It would be something that you kind of probably glossed over, like a stick from the plant room or the bucket from the armory room, or, you know, hell, having to transport fire between the portals. This was genuinely clever puzzle solving. Boy, I love games that only get good 4/5 of the way into it. One of these missions involves reconnecting 2 Toad assistants to each other, so there was even a spin on the traditional Toad gameplay here, meaning I won't count it as filler. Egad apparently thought they were the same person, so it's canonical. He's either colorblind or a damn racist. Take your pick. The top room also introduces a few new motifs. We have a pirate ship, because, you know, all good mansions have one. There's a little space room, which has a bit of a special moment where you go to the moon or some random asteroid. Look, I'm a nerd. I'm not a science nerd, okay? I would normally label this as a special moment, and it's still kind of neat, but I do feel like this is sort of an attempt to recreate the special moment of LM1, where you go to a random planet to get Mario Star, and yeah, this doesn't really do that for me. It could be a coincidence, but this next mission also has a throwback to Luigi's Mansion 1. E4 is kind of a redux of the Boolossus boss fight. This is sort of touted as a fake-out final boss, which I guess is kind of neat, but you just play it and instantly know this ain't final boss energy. Though I will say this fight where you have to chip away at boos by shooting them into a train is vastly better than Boolossus, which I and many others consider the worst part of LM1. Okay, well, I don't know if everyone agrees on that, but I'm just gonna say it like it's a fact. Now, I do want to take this opportunity to talk about the bosses in LM2 because they... okay, look, I know we're having good vibes right now, so let me word this nicely and gingerly as to not make anyone mad. But these fucking suck. Look, LM1's bosses, besides Boolossus, were pretty good. Chauncey was quite memorable as the first oh crap moment of the game. Bogmire was basic, but good. Boolossus is a boss, and the final fight against King Boo and Bowser was a great way to cap off the game. A 75% success rate, you know, it's pretty good. At least that's what my parents told me in school. So with LM2 though, I feel like everyone has kind of a similar experience with the bosses in this game. The first one is really clever. It requires Luigi to light a bunch of cobwebs on fire and slowly inch his way through hell and fury to land his next hit on the giant spider. This is great, and I highlighted the game, and it's also where the bosses completely peak. The boss of the Haunted Towers is ostensibly dog shit. It starts with this ridiculous section where you gotta climb like 30 sets of stairs. If you fall, you have to fight a ghost and climb all over again, which late into this can take a literal minute to get back. You at least have the path revealed for every stair you cross successfully, and there are some indicators of which of the 3 paths is correct, but it's not a consistent clue or pattern, so I got really tripped up here. I'm sure there's something obvious I'm missing, but I swear, sometimes the clue would be as simple as, don't look from that far away, and other times I'm like, what? Yeah, this sucks.
And this is the best part of the mission.
The actual fight is against stairs. I don't know, man. I mean, this would be like if you walked into a bathroom in a video game and the sink started attacking you. Like, okay, yes, it's a ghost that's inhibiting the stairs. But yeah, this unanimously gets laughed at. The boss of the old Clockworks isn't really a boss. It's just a marathon of ghosts. Man, there were a lot of moments in this game where I've had questions, especially whether the game developers ran out of time or money or both. Like, the ghost fighting missions as a whole are way more common than you think. There's another mission like that after the fake out boss in the final mansion, and that's also your reward for getting booze. The boss of the Secret Mine should have just been kept a secret from the public. Yeah, so this mission is vastly hated by everyone online, and I think it was worse in the 3DS version because I actually didn't struggle that much this time around, but I can see why this is unpopular. You basically ride down this ice tunnel and have to shoot bombs at a bunch of ice targets. The problem with this is there's really not a lot of ways to be accurate in your shots. The center ones really gave me the most problems. This would be fine if it weren't timed sections. Basically, if you run out of time, which gets increasingly tight towards the end of the phases, you gotta try all over again with all the ice blocks respawning. I get logistically like why the tunnel can't go on forever, but it would have been nice if the destroyed ice blocks were transferred over. You do have a reticle, but it's less accurate than a drunk playing darts on a Tuesday. It usually just embarrassingly bounces off the walls and then maybe you get a bounce or two, so it's really just all luck, and this fight has taken people many hours of their lives. To be fair though, the final boss is actually really good, though I was disappointed there was no Bowser. That's not really a genuine criticism though, it's just a preference. It's nothing crazy, and LM1s might have been better just for the sheer tension and stress, but you have to land these spike balls on King Boo, using the classic Mario trope of a Boo not being able to look at your character. I always wonder why Boos have this problem, but you know what? I relate to social anxiety. After you give King Boo a concussion with a spiky ball, you have these cute little sections where you gotta run among a mass of falling objects. In general, the ending is quite cute actually. You saved Mario. Oh my god, big shocker. Toads come together to put the Dark Moon pieces back, the ghosts are all happy, some mysterious otherworldly entity says low battery. I actually don't know what that means in the context of the game. The ghosts are no longer crazy, and all is well. Except for the grade I have to give the bosses in this game. 40% is goddamn embarrassing. And that's basically Luigi's Mansion 2, or Dark Moon, or whatever you want to call it. Before we get to the sappy conclusion, there's a few aspects of the gameplay I would like to briefly go over or mention that I kind of sort of glossed over or forgot to talk about during the main review. To start with a positive, the money you collect in this game has a purpose now besides just giving you a ranking. Now the money actually goes to vacuum upgrades, which honestly is a nice little improvement over Luigi's Mansion, even if I prefer the latter's ranking system. These basically just make your vacuum stronger and give your strobe light a little more charge, and it has a really good balance in the game, since just by the hair of the last mission is when I got the last upgrade, so I appreciated having an actual reason to keep collecting money. However, something I don't give as much praise for is that Luigi's Mansion 2 has collectibles, being the little gems as I mentioned earlier. The puzzles to find these are often really fun and has some of the game's most charming moments in my opinion. The issue is, these don't do anything besides unlocking a statue, and that's fine, right? Like, not every game's collectibles contributes to something in the game, and this has been a constant issue with Nintendo as a whole. 100% is just not something they usually care about rewarding most of the time. However, since some of the game's best puzzles are locked behind these, I did find that pretty disappointing, since I felt like a lot of the moments that I thought were cute or challenged my brain in a satisfying way was all for nothing, and I feel like it would have been nicer for the main game and story progression to get some of these more complex, thought-provoking moments, or maybe have the gems be both a collectible and contribute to your money. It's a nice way to add some meat onto the bones of this game, and it's a net positive, but like, a 60%. Now, there's a bunch of smaller gameplay elements and moments in LM2 I'm sure I missed, and that's fine. Like, I don't want this video to be a walkthrough, and honestly, I would hope you discover some of this for yourself. Play the damn game. And there is at least also some side content in this product. The one, of course, people will literally take a bullet for is Scarescraper, which is an online co-op rogue-crawling dungeon game with up to 4 Luigis.
People talk about this mode like it prevented a gaming crash from happening and jumped in front of a train and saved them from their family from a band of armed robbers. It didn't. Relax. It's just okay.
Like, okay, it's fun. It's fine. I didn't find it that enthralling, although I'm not really a multiplayer gamer either. It's a neat concept though. You and eventually, if you actually find a lobby in 2024, a few other players gather around a unique mansion in order to beat ghosts, find Polterpups, and a few other objectives like finding red coins from Super Mario 64. The point is to utilize teamwork and efficiency to survive as you are timed on each floor.
Now, wouldn't this mode be nice if the Nintendo Switch had any voice chat capabilities?
Yeah, so there's the standard Nintendo few D-pad prompts, but honestly, if you're good at this game, this mode goes on forever. The round I played for this review lasted 20 minutes until I, accidentally disconnected. Damn Wi-Fi.
You know, I don't love Luigi's Mansion 2, but I am grateful for it existing, I guess.
I played a lot of games growing up. Before I even started being critical of them to any capacity, I knew some were either really good or really bad. Luigi's Mansion 2 was honestly the first game I felt mixed on. Okay, second, it was the other half of that line that I spoke about earlier. Suddenly, I wanted to find reviews of this game. I wanted to see other opinions on internet forums. I wanted to discuss it further with people, because it's so in the middle and debatably good or debatably bad. I think it taught me nuance. It taught me that there can be good in a game that's bad, or bad in a game that's good. And that's just how I feel about Luigi's Mansion 2. It's a mixed bag of a product that some people love and some people just hate. There's a lot of aspects the developers did a fantastic job with. The gameplay at times, phenomenal. Peak Nintendo. And there's a lot of love put into the presentation and some of the charm. Next Level Games were given a tricky proposition, since I don't think it would have been easy or possible to straight up replicate Luigi's Mansion 1. However, I just feel like they strayed too far from the original product. It almost doesn't feel like a sequel. It almost feels like the start of a new series, or a spin-off of a spin-off. The motif of LM2, which is being separated by missions or by mansion, really does contribute to this feeling I have of this game being somewhere in the middle. It's disconnected, it's disjointed, and this took too many creative liberties that didn't really work. And it was released in a time where every Nintendo franchise was basically guilty of this to some degree. I mean, look, when it released, Nintendo was not doing that well as a company. They didn't want to take risks, push gaming forward anymore. I feel like they were just happy to make any profit at all or have games that would get 10 out of 10s. So Luigi's Mansion 2 to me was a byproduct of the times and a byproduct of meddling from out-of-touch Nintendo executives, and it suffered greatly for it. If there's any upside, there's still millions of people who love this game dearly. Fans of the classic game may not have loved this, but there's a completely new generation who felt about Luigi's Mansion 2 as I did Luigi's Mansion 1. No matter how you feel about either game, that's a beautiful thing, and an example of Nintendo's everlasting magic and impact on gaming.
You know, I think back to the beginning of this video, and sometimes I think I'm a little too harsh in regards to the Wii U and the 3DS era. So you know what? During the production of this video, I bought a Wii U, and I bought Xenoblade Chronicles X.